Lisa Holm was born on February 7, 1998, in the small Swedish town of Hord. It was a calm and peaceful place where she lived together with her parents and her older sister. Lisa was a kind, optimistic, and determined individual. Even before finishing school, she had already decided that she wanted to go to Australia to study architecture. Lisa also traveled frequently with her parents, visiting many different countries. She was also very independent. Since her teenage years, Lisa had been taking on various part-time jobs to earn her own money. Before the summer of 2015, when Lisa was 17, she finally got her first serious job at a cafe located about a 40-minute drive from her home. During the first few weeks, her parents would drive her there, but soon her father decided to buy her a scooter. Lisa already had a license for this type of vehicle, while she would only be able to get a car license after turning 18. She was delighted with this gift because she wanted to travel to work on her own. However, during the first few weeks, her father still followed her in his car since Lisa had almost no experience driving on the roads. She only worked on weekends, and her father accompanied her every morning and evening. This routine continued until June 7th, when he finally allowed her to drive to the cafe by herself. Around midday, her parents decided to visit her at work and have lunch together. That day, the cafe was quite busy, so Lisa was very occupied with her tasks. She took a short break to have lunch, shared a quick meal with her parents, and then they went back home. At 6:23, Lisa sent her father a text saying that she was leaving work. But 3 minutes later, he received a phone call from her. He answered, but no one spoke. He heard some voices in the background and assumed Lisa had called him by mistake. He thought she was talking to her colleagues and also heard the sound of a car door closing. He called out her name several times without getting a response, then ended the call and started waiting for her to return home. But she never arrived. An hour went by, and Lisa's parents began to worry. She should have been home by then, so her father immediately feared that something might have happened to her on the way. It was her first time riding the scooter alone, and he was very worried about her safety. He tried calling her multiple times, but Lisa's phone was turned off. After waiting for a few more minutes, her father decided to go out on the road, hoping to meet her somewhere along the way, since Lisa was supposed to take the shortest route. He feared that Lisa might have been in an accident, so he drove slowly, carefully scanning the road. However, Lisa was nowhere to be seen. Eventually, he reached the cafe without finding his daughter. When he arrived at her workplace, he saw Lisa's scooter parked in front of the building. By that moment, the man was already in a state of panic, having been unable to find his daughter along the entire route. Seeing her scooter, he immediately felt relieved, thinking that for some reason, she might have stayed behind at work. But there was no one inside the cafe, and he noticed something unusual. Lisa's scooter keys were still in the ignition, with a helmet hanging on the handle. All of this made him believe that something bad had happened to his daughter. She would never have left the keys in the scooter and abandoned it in the parking lot unattended. Meanwhile, Lisa's mother called the cafe owner, hoping to find out something about her daughter's whereabouts. But the woman said she had no idea where Lisa might have gone. She had called her employees around 6 p.m., and they had told her they were closing the cafe. After Lisa's mother's call, the cafe owner immediately got in her car and drove there. On her way, she phoned 4 of her friends who lived nearby and asked them to help with the search. When the cafe owner arrived at the scene, she and Lisa's father began searching the cafe and the surrounding area together. Their last hope was that Lisa, for some reason, might have decided to take a bus instead of her scooter. They checked the schedule, and Lisa's mother and older sister drove to the bus stop in their town. Unfortunately, that theory was not confirmed. Lisa was not on the bus, so her family immediately contacted the police. By that time, it was almost 10 p.m., and it had already gotten dark outside. The police quickly launched an extensive search. The fact that Lisa's scooter was left in the parking lot with the keys inside led them to suspect that she might have been abducted. Cases like that were quite rare in Sweden, especially in the remote provincial area where Lisa's town was located. Therefore, the police immediately dispatched several teams with search dogs, while other officers began knocking on every house near the cafe. When Lisa's classmates and friends heard about her disappearance, they began spreading the news on social media, hoping to attract attention and possibly find witnesses. The search went on throughout the night but produced no results. On Monday morning, the police department publicly announced Lisa's disappearance, urging anyone with useful information to come forward. Around the same time, a man who came to work at a barn across from the cafe discovered a motorcycle glove on the ground and reported it to the police. Detectives had already inspected that barn on the night Lisa went missing but hadn't seen the glove before. They showed it to Lisa's parents, who confirmed that it belonged to their daughter. This further supported the abduction theory, and the police deployed additional search teams. By then, news of Lisa's disappearance had spread across the entire country, and hundreds of volunteers joined the search. On Tuesday, the police received several more alarming leads. Volunteers combing the area along a dirt road a few hundred yards from the cafe found a phone case, a receipt, a ticket, and a broken smartphone screen. Investigators quickly confirmed that all these items belonged to Lisa and concentrated their search in that area. Soon, they also discovered more fragments of the broken smartphone, Lisa's ID, and several additional receipts. All of these items were scattered along the same dirt road. After these discoveries, the police became almost certain that Lisa had been abducted. They poured every available resource into the operation, and with each passing day, more people joined the effort. The case became the main news story in Sweden, and hundreds of volunteers came from all over the country to help in the search. A local volunteer organization that specialized in finding missing people also joined in. This made the search for Lisa the largest operation of its kind in Sweden's modern history, with over 1,000 participants. The police also received numerous tips. One woman told them that she had gone jogging the day before Lisa's disappearance. At one point, a man standing beside his car stopped her on the road. He spoke in English and asked her for directions to a city she had never heard of. She tried to show him the route on Google Maps, but the man asked her to get into his car and show it to him directly on his GPS. Naturally, the woman found this request highly suspicious, so she refused and kept running. She also told police something interesting. She believed she had seen the same man among the workers who were repairing the barn located across the road from the cafe. Lisa's co-workers also shared an observation. On the day she went missing, one of them noticed two men standing across the road from the cafe, looking toward the building. At the time, she didn't think much of it, but after Lisa disappeared, she decided to tell the police. The next morning, on Wednesday, Lisa's father and some of his friends went to search along the dirt road where her belongings had been found. Walking a bit farther, he made several more troubling discoveries. He found Lisa's driver's license and her house keys. It looked as if Lisa had been taken along that road away from the cafe while the abductor threw her belongings out of the vehicle as they drove. The police and volunteers concentrated all their efforts on that area, but no more items were found. That same evening, a friend of Lisa's father was returning home from the search. As he passed by the cafe, he noticed that the police tape had been removed from the barn where Lisa's glove had been found. He decided to go inside again to look for any more clues. He took a flashlight from his car, it was already getting dark, and searched the premises for several minutes until something shiny on the floor caught his eye. When he looked closer, he saw a woman's earring and another just like it nearby. The man reported this to the police, who showed the earrings to Lisa's parents. They confirmed that the jewelry belonged to their daughter. The police once again sealed off the barn and conducted a more thorough search. The lead investigator later explained that on the first day of the search, their main focus had been finding the girl herself, so the barn had not been searched in great detail. They could have easily missed small items like earrings, but this time, they brought in multiple forensic experts and search dogs. During this new inspection, they found something rather unusual. Behind one of the walls, the police discovered human feces. At first, it didn't seem related to the case, but forensic specialists put forward an interesting theory. They explained that when criminals commit serious and horrific acts, their bodies produce extreme amounts of adrenaline, which can sometimes cause an uncontrollable need to relieve themselves. For example, it is not uncommon for killers to urinate before or during a murder. Considering that Lisa's glove and earrings were found in that same barn, police theorized that if she had been abducted, the perpetrator might have dragged her into that building. Therefore, detectives didn't rule out the possibility that the person responsible, overwhelmed by adrenaline, couldn't hold it and relieve themselves there. The feces were sent for DNA analysis. On Friday, the search area expanded, and volunteers reached a farm about 2 miles from the cafe. It consisted of several large buildings where many people worked, and the search team decided to inspect them all. However, shortly after they arrived, 2 men showed up at the farm. They didn't speak Swedish and communicated only in English. One of them said that the police had already searched that farm, but the search leader didn't believe it. He thought he would have known if that were true, so he decided to continue. The 2 men walked around for a while, watching the volunteers, and eventually left. About an hour later, members of the search team found a pile of branches behind the cow's shed. Underneath, they discovered a motorcycle helmet, a jacket, and a pair of headphones. The police immediately arrived and confirmed that the items belonged to Lisa. They sent forensic experts to conduct a detailed inspection of the farm. Detectives also heard about the 2 strange men who had tried to stop the volunteers from searching the area. The police also remembered the jogger's account of a suspicious English-speaking man. In fact, they already had an idea who he might be. From the first days of the search, they had visited every house near the cafe. In one of them lived 2 brothers from Lithuania and the wife of one of them. None of the 3 spoke Swedish, communicating only in English. They were the only people for miles who didn't speak the local language. The police also had other indirect reasons to suspect them. The brothers worked in the barn across the road from the cafe and at the farm where Lisa's helmet had been found. They knew both locations well, and the dirt road where Lisa's belongings were discovered led directly to their house. Since there were no other suspects, the police decided to question all 3. Meanwhile, forensic experts arrived at the farm. Together with the volunteers, they continued to inspect the area, and soon, their attention was drawn to an old trailer. It was surrounded by tall grass and appeared in use for years. But the grass near the door was flattened, as if something had recently been placed there. Some blades were even caught under the door, suggesting that it had been opened recently. When forensic experts opened the door, they were immediately hit by a strong smell of decay. Inside, there were many lockers for clothing. Apparently, it had once served as a changing room for workers. All the lockers except one were locked, and investigators suspected that Lisa's body might be inside one. They began opening each locker until they reached one that was left open, where, hidden behind a pile of old clothes and rags, they found Lisa's body. Despite the small size of the locker, the perpetrator had managed to force their victim inside. Lisa had a rope around her neck and a large amount of tape wrapped over her head. Her pants were pulled down, and her shirt was lifted up. Medical experts determined that Lisa had died from strangulation. However, they found no evidence of sexual assault. All her clothing was sent to the lab, while news of her body's discovery spread quickly across the nation. The story of Lisa's abduction had already dominated Swedish headlines, and when her murder was confirmed, the entire country was in shock. Crimes like this were exceedingly rare in Sweden, and people were horrified that someone could commit such an atrocity. On the same day her body was found, something strange and unsettling happened. YouTube users discovered a video uploaded 13 days before the murder. The video was titled 13, and showed a countdown timer. What made it even more disturbing was the name of the channel. It was called Lisa Home. News about the video quickly spread through the media, leaving people stunned by the bizarre coincidence. Some speculated that someone had predicted the murder. But in reality, it turned out to be far simpler. Someone had changed the channel's name and video title after Lisa's body was found, either to spark a conspiracy theory or to play a cruel prank. Meanwhile, the police were doing everything they could to catch the killer as quickly as possible. By the time Lisa's body was found, investigators had already detained the 2 brothers and the woman, but all 3 denied any involvement. They claimed that at the time of the abduction, they had been at home, providing alibis for one another. According to their accounts, the older brother, Nargis, had been asleep in his room, while his wife was preparing dinner, and the younger brother was on the computer. Nargis also said that around 8 p.m., he woke up and went to the gas station to buy pizza and cigarettes. The police were skeptical of their alibis, believing they could simply be covering for one another. They collected DNA samples from all three, but investigators still had no direct evidence linking anyone to the murder. That didn't last long. Forensic experts continued to search the barn and the farm thoroughly, using every available resource and team, and soon, their efforts paid off. Inside the barn, there was a small room resembling an office. It had a large window overlooking the cafe. Upon examining this space, experts discovered 15 traces of male semen on the walls and floor near the window. It appeared that someone had stood there watching the cafe employees, including Lisa, and gratifying themselves. These semen samples were sent to the laboratory, where DNA profiles were quickly extracted. All 15 matched the DNA of the older brother, 35-year-old Nargis. The same was true for the feces found in the barn. They also belonged to him. In the next room, which had previously been used to store cow's milk, forensic specialists noticed a pipe about 2 feet above the floor, covered with thick dust except for one clean strip. The clean area's size perfectly matched the rope that had been used to strangle Lisa. Traces of blood were also found on the pipe, and DNA analysis confirmed they belonged to Nargis. On the floor beneath the pipe, investigators found a piece of the same rope. Tests revealed 2 DNA profiles on it, Lisa's and Nargis's. This was a major breakthrough for the police, as it directly linked him to the murder weapon. In addition, one of Lisa's hairs was found on the floor of that room. Another crucial discovery came from her jacket, which had traces of Nargis's DNA. Based on the evidence, the police concluded that Lisa was killed there. They reconstructed the likely sequence of events. Nargis had been watching the cafe for some time, and when Lisa was alone in the parking lot, he approached her. Based on the jogger's testimony, he might have asked Lisa for directions to a city or used some other pretext. Then, Nargis could have asked her to get into his car to show the route on his GPS. Since Lisa was kind-hearted and always willing to help others, she might have agreed. Once she got in, he likely taped her mouth shut and drove her to the barn. There, he wrapped the rope around her neck and hanged her from the pipe. According to forensic experts, the sight might have aroused him so intensely that, overwhelmed by adrenaline, he defecated on the floor. After she died, he placed Lisa's body in his car and drove to the farm, throwing her belongings out the window along the way. There, he hid her body inside the trailer locker, covering it with old clothes scattered around. From the moment of the abduction, the entire sequence took less than an hour. Despite all the evidence, Nargis continued to claim innocence. His wife and younger brother were released since nothing implicated them. Once free, they almost immediately left Sweden and returned to Lithuania. Preparations for the trial were intense. Nargis claimed that he had worked in that barn for a long time, suggesting that his DNA could have remained there from before. He also had an alibi from his wife and brother. Although there were serious doubts about the credibility of both, in court, that could still have worked in his favor. However, the presence of Nargis's DNA on the victim's clothing could only be explained by direct contact on the day of the murder. The police also located a witness who had seen his car near the cafe shortly before and after Lisa's abduction. According to that witness, the car had passed along the road between the cafe and the farm several times, even though Nargis's family claimed he had been asleep at home during that period. For months after Lisa's body was found, experts continued examining every piece of evidence using the most advanced tools. Eventually, they found traces of Nargis's DNA on nearly all of Lisa's clothing, including inside her underwear. Since the case was still capturing the country's attention, investigators kept looking for any new evidence that could strengthen the prosecution and further prove Nargis's guilt. They even traveled to Lithuania to question his wife and brother again. The woman maintained that Nargis had never left home between 6 and 8 p.m. But when it was the younger brother's turn, detectives finally got what they needed. After they presented him with all the evidence against his brother, and described what he had done to the 17-year-old girl, the man decided to tell the truth. He said that Nargis had not been home that evening and only returned around 7:30 p.m. He was covered in dirt, and immediately threw his clothes into the washing machine. When the police began questioning local residents and approaching their home, Nargis whispered to his brother, "Tell them I was home at that time." Later, Nargis explained that he feared being framed for a crime he hadn't committed because he was an immigrant and had no solid alibi. The younger brother had genuinely believed he was innocent, but after hearing about all the evidence, he realized the truth. Lisa's funeral took place a month after her murder. The church where it was held could only fit about 130 people, but many more came to say goodbye. Organizers even set up benches and large screens outside so everyone could watch the ceremony. The trial began 4 months after the murder. The case once again gripped the entire nation, putting enormous pressure on everyone involved. None of them could afford to make a mistake. Nargis's lawyer argued that his client's DNA might have been left on the victim's clothing from his previous work in the barn. The prosecution, however, dismissed this argument, pointing out that such an explanation made no sense, especially in the case of Lisa's underwear. The only possible way the suspect's DNA could have been found there was if he had touched it directly. The lawyer couldn't present any convincing evidence of his client's innocence. At one point, he tried to claim that the real killer was Nargis's younger brother. According to this version, the brother had somehow collected multiple DNA samples from Nargis and planted them on the victim's body and at the crime scene. However, the lawyer failed to explain how such manipulation of DNA would even be possible. The trial lasted for a month, and Nargis was found guilty of murder. He was sentenced to life in a high-security prison. Considering this was Sweden, the facility resembled more of a comfortable 3-star hotel. His lawyer attempted to appeal, but the appeal was denied. In early 2017, Nargis himself requested to be deported and transferred to a prison in Lithuania. The reasons for his decision were unknown. Lithuanian prisons were significantly harsher than Swedish ones, but the court approved his request, as housing inmates under Sweden's conditions cost taxpayers hundreds of dollars per day. Later that same year, his motives became clear. He appealed to a Lithuanian court, which reduced his sentence from life imprisonment to 15 years. However, the victory was short-lived. A few weeks later, the court overturned that decision, and Nargis was once again ordered to serve life in prison. This time, he had no chance of returning to his more comfortable Swedish cell. 5 years later, in August 2022, Nargis faced another consequence of being transferred to a Lithuanian prison. While inmates were being moved to another block, one of them attacked Nargis with a shank. He sustained severe injuries and died on the way to the hospital. As for his wife, her involvement has never been fully ruled out. If you found this case intriguing, make sure to like and subscribe. We upload new crime case videos every night. Stay tuned and brace yourself for what's coming next.